growers that are able to, so they are able to farm without these toxic chemicals, I think would be very helpful, and talk about all the waste of water and resources to lose that much of a huge crop for us.
And before we get to Myra, you bring up a point that's been part of the dialogue out there as well. You say you need better seeds.
Right.
And that's an expensive prospect to create and to develop those seeds. We need science and we need the research behind it. And the research dollars from a government perspective or a public perspective are not always there. So a lot of that technology has moved into the private sector, like in ag business, as people have classified it, and they're developing those seeds. What issues do you see that playing out?
Well, I think for us, you have so much money going towards developing all these different pesticides to handle new races of these diseases, and I just don't think that organic is lucrative enough yet for there to be as much resources devoted to developing seeds for growers that aren't going to be using those chemicals. So I think that as a smaller industry, we're not getting that benefit as much of those people that are driven by the potential for profits with these new chemicals. So it would be great to have more research dollars devoted by the government.
So that's an action item that can take place.
That would be great.
Well, the government is deeply involved in agriculture. This has not been a free market system for a very, very long time. I mean, it is a game played according to a set of rules that are written, mostly in the Farm Bill. And the Farm Bill, for the last, 30 years or so, 40 years, has been really dedicated to this idea of driving down food prices, and which is what everybody wanted. And the public's interest for a very long time was making calories plentiful and cheap. We had a lot of hungry people in this country, and food price inflation nobody likes, and the government figured out how to do it. Earl Butz deserves a lot of credit for figuring out a new way to support farmers. Basically, we rewrote the rules of how we use subsidies. And now subsidies and I'm talking about commodity crops, are designed in such a way that they tend to push prices down. They used to be designed to hold them up, but that wasn't appealing to the buyers of cheap agricultural commodities. And, there was an interest in driving down the prices. So right now we have a system that keeps grain, until this ethanol boom, keeps grain really, really cheap, which, I can't, I don't know the research that Gary was citing, but I can cite other research. Tim Weiss I forget the school in Boston, the company, Tufts University, another economist who's done a lot of research showing the benefits of cheap grain to animal feeding, and that indeed they have been the great beneficiaries, people feeding animals on corn and soy, of our agricultural policies over time. And they are one of the reasons that the animals over time left the fields, because farmers could not grow grain as cheaply as feedlots could buy them. So the government supports certain kinds of agriculture and certain approaches to agriculture. The subsidies also drive us further down the road of monoculture. They reward you for getting bigger. You get more subsidies. The caps on them are very weak. But the government does a lot of positive things too. The government is involved in agricultural research, which I think is vitally important. We need public research for the reasons that Myra was saying. Because if we allow corporations to drive the research agenda will be how to invent new products to sell to farmers. But sometimes the best farming is not product-driven. Organic farming, when it works well, is process-driven. And that we need to expand our definition of technology, a really smart rotation that takes care of some soil disease or weed problem is as important in technology as a new bottle of herbicide. But it's hard to get investment for that because you can't patent that, you can't own it. So that's why the public sector and ag research, university sector is just so important. And the government has a potential role to play also in stimulating. Right now, there's some very encouraging things happening in the USDA to encourage regional food systems and the growth of farmers markets and all these things. So it's really a mixed bag, but make no mistake that the government is, in its own messy, conflicted way, is really kind of giving us the food system we have. The government's interests, though, are, I think, about to change. If we get healthcare reform of any kind, there will be a powerful impetus on the part of both the government, which is now responsible for more of our health care, or will be, and the health insurers to deal with these chronic diseases linked to diet. And I think you'll see a real change in attitude, and that this movement to reform the food system is about to get a very powerful finale. And that when a health insurance company looks at the, let's say, the amount of soda consumed by adolescents in America, they will realize that they stand to make a lot of money by preventing every new case of type 2 diabetes. And they will raise questions about the Farm Bill. Because the Farm Bill is one of the reasons that soda is so cheap. We subsidize, in effect, and it's indirect, but we subsidize high fructose corn syrup in the same way we subsidize, fast food feed.
You bring up a good point when we talk about farm policy and the Farm Bill. And I want to bring it home a little bit. Let's bring it to California now. Because California is perhaps the most diverse agricultural state in the nation. We know that. We've led the nation for more than 50 years with our agriculture, more than 300 different crops and commodities here in the state. We've not always been present in that Farm Bill debate. So how is it different for the folks here, in this building versus, the folks and producers across the country? And I'll kind of, go down to Gary and come back this way. What's that like? What is the question? When we start looking at farm policy and the Farm Bill, how California is unique in that dialogue because of the nature of our agriculture versus the program crops of wheat, cotton, and
I'm not really certain what you're talking about, but the thing that concerns us most in California at the moment also concerns us in Colorado. In general, government regulations are fine with us. We will do whatever is necessary to do the right things with manure management, with groundwater, with erosion. We're willing to do those things. But just 2 weeks ago, the Endangered Species Act in the state of Colorado has taken 18.375 miles of the richest farming ground we have in the state of Colorado so that we can protect the prevalent jumping mouse. The prevalent jumping mouse is never seen in the daytime. You have to go out at night and use infrared. It's a mouse that jumps up out of the grass, does a couple of turns, and goes back to the ground. Here in California, you have a similar sort of problem with irrigation water being directed away from the production of food. I'm interested in the production of food. And not only for us, I want us to take the science and technology that we've developed in this country to others. I worked for 5 years in Tanzania, off and on. A graduate student and I went for 6 weeks each year, trying to help the Maasai tribesmen develop a marketing system for their livestock and get more money for it when they sold it. When you look at the FAO United Nations report on where all these people are about to starve to death, sub-Saharan Africa. So we've got to do everything that we can possibly do in this country to make our food as cheap as we possibly can. We've got to ship as much of it as we can afford to ship to other parts of the world, but we've also got to quit fighting everybody in the world and spend some money on teaching people how to grow their own food.
Okay. I mean, I was at Michael's lecture at Berkeley a few weeks ago. And Michael had all these wildly processed foods or food-like substances, as he called them. He had a lot of processed in that thing. And he had one apple. And he was just talking about how it's so unfortunate how that apple is so expensive for the average person and how all the other food is so cheap. And so I think when you're saying how does California differ from a lot of these commodity crops that do have subsidies is that, we aren't subsidized, and
Right.
so our food is expensive. And it is when I just had my first live chat on the computer with all these mommy bloggers, and